All right, so um, we've got a stack of articles here all about Bitcoin, and it looks like
Hmm.
we're going to be diving into some pretty intense debate.
Yeah,
There's this
it's a juicy one.
controversial paper from the European Central Bank
Hmm.
that's basically saying Bitcoin is just a speculative bubble
Right.
and that this got some pretty serious consequences
Yeah.
when it comes to
Yeah.
how wealth is distributed.
Hmm.
And then on the other side, we've got this really fiery
Yeah.
rebuttal from some Bitcoin academics.
Yeah. Pushing back hard.
And it seems like you really want to get both sides of this debate.
Absolutely.
And you're especially interested in this idea
Yes.
that even our good old euro
Right.
might have similar distribution problems
Exactly.
through something called the Cantillon effect.
You got it.
So buckle up, everybody.
Yeah.
This is going to be a wild ride.
What I think is so interesting about this whole thing is that it's not just like a boring academic debate, you know? The rebuttal's backed by the Satoshi Action Fund, and they don't hold back at all.
Oh, yeah, they really come out swinging.
They even hint that the ECB might have some ulterior motives, you know?
Okay, so let's start by breaking down the ECB's argument.
Yeah.
What are they actually saying about Bitcoin?
Well, basically, they're saying that Bitcoin has totally failed to become that global payment system it promised to be.
Right.
It's basically become this purely speculative asset with no real value, according to them.
Okay.
They claim its price is just driven by hype, and all this volatility makes it completely useless for everyday transactions.
So they're saying it's not practical as a currency.
Yeah, that's a big part of it.
And they link this to wealth distribution, right?
Exactly, because Bitcoin's supply is fixed. Any price increase just moves wealth from the people who buy in later to those who got in early, you know?
Ah, I see. So the early adopters benefit at the expense of the later ones.
Right, and they even suggest that this could affect elections, especially in the U.S.
Okay, so they're saying it could actually have political consequences.
Yeah, they're making a pretty bold statement.
All right, well, let's hear what the rebuttal has to say about all this.
Okay, so the rebuttal comes from people like Murray Rudd and Alan Farrington, and they're basically arguing that the ECB is completely misrepresenting both the purpose and the technology behind Bitcoin.
Mhm.
They point to innovations like the Lightning Network, which is making Bitcoin transactions faster and cheaper.
So they're saying Bitcoin is actually becoming more practical as a payment system.
Yes, exactly, even though the ECB says it's failing.
Okay, so that's a direct counter-argument.
And they even use real-world examples of Bitcoin being used for things like cross-border payments remittances, where it can really cut down on those fees.
Oh, interesting. So they're saying, look, it's already happening.
Yeah, it's not just some theoretical idea.
Okay, so they're pushing back on this idea that Bitcoin has no real-world use.
Exactly.
But what about the value argument?
Right.
The ECB says it has no intrinsic value.
Well, the rebuttal challenges that too. They say that Bitcoin, just like gold, gets its value from its scarcity, its decentralized nature, and its potential as a store of value.
Okay.
Especially with all the inflation we're seeing, they see Bitcoin as a way to protect yourself against the falling purchasing power of traditional currencies.
So like a hedge against inflation.
Exactly.
And I think they brought up BlackRock too, right?
Oh, yeah, they definitely did. They use BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, embracing Bitcoin as evidence against the ECB's claim that it's all just a speculative bubble with no institutional support.
And BlackRock's CEO, Larry Fink. He's even compared Bitcoin to gold, hasn't he?
He has indeed. That's a pretty big deal coming from someone like him.
Okay, so we've got these two very different perspectives on Bitcoin's role in the economy.
Yeah.
On one hand, you've got the ECB painting this picture of a speculative asset that's completely detached from reality.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other hand, the rebuttal is arguing that Bitcoin has this practical utility and that it's actually becoming increasingly important in the financial world.
Right, it's a real clash of ideologies.
But where does this Cantillon effect that you mentioned fit into all of this?
That's where things get really interesting. The ECB is really focused on Bitcoin's potential to redistribute wealth, right?
Right.
But the rebuttal cleverly points out that fiat currencies, the ones controlled by central banks, are just as vulnerable, if not more so, to this Cantillon effect.
Wait, remind me, what exactly is the Cantillon effect again?
Okay, so imagine new money being created.
Okay.
The Cantillon effect basically says that this new money doesn't spread out evenly throughout the economy.
Okay.
Those closest to the source of that money creation, often banks and the first people to get loans, they benefit the most,
I see.
while everyone else further down the line sees their purchasing power shrink as prices go up.
So the rebuttal is saying that the ECB is being hypocritical by worrying about Bitcoin's wealth redistribution when the euro and other fiat currencies are causing the same problem through inflation.
Exactly. They're saying, hey, you're worried about Bitcoin. Look at what's happening with the euro.
That's a good point.
They argue that Bitcoin, with its fixed supply, could actually protect against this kind of wealth transfer that happens with inflation.
Okay.
And they use a really relatable example to illustrate this point.
I'm all ears.
Think about how much less your euro buys you today compared to, say, 10 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
It's a real-world example of the Cantillon effect in action. Inflationary policies have basically eroded the value of our savings and benefited those who own assets that go up in value with inflation.
Wow. I never thought about it like that.
It's a pretty powerful argument.
So they're saying that even the euro, which is supposed to be a stable currency, is inherently biased in how it distributes wealth.
That's the core of their argument. They're basically accusing the ECB of focusing on Bitcoin's potential problems while ignoring the very real problems that exist in the system they control.
Okay, so we've got the ECB's main points and the rebuttal's counter-arguments laid out.
Right.
What else do they discuss?
You know, one thing that really jumps out at me from the rebuttal is how they challenge the ECB's whole view of Bitcoin's value. It's like the ECB is stuck on this idea that Bitcoin needs to replace cash at the grocery store, you know?
Right, like if it's not going to be our digital pocket change, it's worthless.
Exactly. But the rebuttal's saying, hey, that's way too narrow a focus. They're arguing that Bitcoin has all this broader potential.
Right.
They see it as this platform for innovation, a store of value in a world that's, you know, increasingly uncertain.
Okay.
And they even say that it can have value beyond just money.
What do you mean value beyond money?
Well, they highlight how Bitcoin's being used to support human rights and freedom of speech.
Well, wow.
Especially in places with authoritarian governments, you know?
Right.
They give examples of Bitcoin helping people get around censorship fund movements, even escape financial oppression.
So it's like a tool for social good almost.
Yeah, exactly. Empowering individuals.
That's a really different way of looking at it.
It really shows how technology can be this double-edged sword, you know?
Right.
The impact depends on who's controlling it and how it's used.
So how does this tie into the ECB's push for their own digital currency?
Well, they bring that up too. They argue that the ECB is super quick to point out all the risks of Bitcoin, but they seem to be ignoring the potential downsides of putting even more power in the hands of governments and central banks.
Right. So it's like they're saying, hey, before you jump all in on a digital euro, think about what that could mean for privacy and freedom, you know, individual control.
Exactly. And they really emphasize that Bitcoin's decentralized nature makes it resistant to censorship and government control.
Right.
It gives people a level of autonomy that you just don't get with a central bank digital currency.
It seems like this whole debate about Bitcoin is about so much more than just Bitcoin.
It really is.
It's about what kind of future we want. One where technology empowers us or one where it just reinforces those existing power structures.
You hit the nail on the head. It raises these really important questions about the balance between efficiency, security, and freedom in this increasingly digital world.
The rebuttal also spends a lot of time talking about Bitcoin's energy consumption.
Oh, yeah, that's been a hot topic for a while.
The ECB uses it to paint Bitcoin as this environmentally unsustainable thing, right?
Yeah, irresponsible even.
But the rebuttal offers a different perspective.
Right. They acknowledge that mining Bitcoin takes a lot of energy, but they say the ECB's analysis is incomplete.
Okay.
They point out that more and more Bitcoin mining is being powered by renewable energy, and that the whole industry is motivated to find more efficient and sustainable solutions.
They even suggest that Bitcoin mining could actually encourage the development of new energy technologies.
Right.
And even improve grid stability.
Especially in areas with lots of renewable energy.
It's kind of a mind-blowing shift.
It is.
From Bitcoin mining being a problem to potentially being part of the solution.
Yeah, and they challenge the ECB to look beyond just energy consumption.
All right.
They say we need to consider the big picture, including all the potential benefits of Bitcoin. Like maybe reducing our reliance on traditional financial systems, which have their own environmental impact.
Okay, so we've covered a lot here.
We have.
From the ECB's criticisms of Bitcoin as this speculative bubble to the rebuttal's arguments about its potential benefits and these wider societal implications.
Yeah.
We've talked about wealth distribution, individual freedom, the role of central banks, even environmental sustainability.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion.
Right.
Each layer reveals more complexity.
And at the heart of it all, this question remains, You know,
What kind of future are we building?
exactly. Do we double down on centralized systems of control,
Mm-hmm.
or do we explore these possibilities of decentralized technologies that actually empower people?
That's a huge question.
It is,
And there's no easy answer.
but Bitcoin is forcing us to confront it.
Absolutely. It is.
Yeah.
And that's why this whole debate is so important. Even for people who aren't into Bitcoin or crypto, it really gets at the core principles of our financial system and how technology might reshape them.
All right, so we've really gone deep on the ECB paper and the rebuttal,
We have.
analyzed their arguments, and consider the wider context.
Yep.
We've seen how this discussion goes way beyond just Bitcoin itself.
Yeah, it brings up all these issues like wealth distribution, individual freedom, and the role of central banks in this digital age we're living in.
But there's one more point from the rebuttal I think we need to address.
Okay.
They suggest that the ECB's critique might be driven, at least in part, by self-interest.
Ah, yes, the question of motives.
Yeah.
Things are about to get interesting.
Okay, so we're back, and things are about to get a little, well, let's just say meta. We're not just talking about Bitcoin anymore.
Right.
We're actually questioning the motives of the people who are talking about it.
Yeah, it's a really important part of this whole debate.
Right.
When you have a technology that's this disruptive, especially one that challenges the status quo, like Bitcoin does,
Right.
there's always going to be pushback.
Yeah.
And sometimes that pushback is disguised as, concern.
So the rebuttal is basically saying that the ECB might be playing games here,
Yeah.
trying to make Bitcoin look bad, while they're busy developing their own digital currency.
It's a classic case of trying to control the narrative.
Right.
And it's not just the ECB either.
Okay.
The rebuttal points out that the traditional financial industry has a lot to lose if Bitcoin really takes off.
Right. All those banks, payment processors,
Exactly.
all the middlemen who make money from every single transaction.
They have a huge incentive to keep things the way they are.
So how do we, as, informed listeners, navigate this whole thing?
Right.
Feels like a minefield out there.
It is. It's tricky, but it all comes down to critical thinking,
Okay.
Don't just accept what you hear at face value.
Even if it's coming from like a big institution.
And even if it sounds like it's coming from an authority.
Especially with something as controversial as Bitcoin.
Exactly. Do your own research, consider different perspectives, and be aware of the motivations of the people who are shaping the narrative.
So look for independent analysis. Find those diverse viewpoints.
Yep.
And don't be afraid to ask those tough questions.
Exactly. And maybe, most importantly, be skeptical of anyone who claims to have all the answers.
Yeah.
This is a complex space. There's still so much we don't know.
It's a good reminder to stay humble when we're dealing with these new technologies.
Yeah, we can't predict the future, but we can be informed and thoughtful about how we shape it.
And that's what this whole deep dive has been about, right?
I think so.
It's not about telling you what to think about Bitcoin.
Right?
It's about giving you the tools to form your own opinions.
Exactly. Giving you the knowledge, the critical thinking skills.
We've explored the arguments, looked at the evidence, considered those potential biases. Now it's up to you, the listener, to decide where you stand.
Yeah, this is a complex issue. It's constantly evolving.
But at its core, this debate about Bitcoin is really a debate about the future we want to build, isn't it?
It is. Do we embrace innovation and decentralization?
Or do we stick with that familiar comfort of centralized control?
That's a question that goes way beyond economics and technology.
Right.
It's about our values, our priorities, the world we want to leave for our kids.
So keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
The future's being written right now.
And we all have a role to play in